Nice. And without further ado, let's meet our panelists. First up, we have Kyle.
Hi, my name's Kyle. I am a UX researcher at CIDC. Before this, I used to work at a startup called Learners, and we were an ed tech company that made educational content for people interested in UX and product design. And I am a recent-ish graduate of the University of Toronto. I finished in December 2019, right before the pandemic started. And I've been working in user experience research for 2 years now.
Nice. Welcome, Kyle. Let's have a round of applause for Kyle. And moving on, next one is Gloria.
Hi, I'm Gloria. I'm a user experience researcher at Okta. I'm working on the topic of digital identity. And previous to that, I actually was a researcher at Mozilla for privacy and security products and Pocket as well. So, and previous to that, like several startups over the past 10 years. So yeah, I've worked both in Toronto and California as well. So I think that's one thing that is a little bit different about me, and actually both from the US and Canada have experience at working in two environments. Yeah, so that's me.
Nice. Round of applause for Gloria. Next up, we have Kevin.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Kevin. I'm a user experience researcher at Autodesk. I just graduated last year, actually, so 1 year into working full time. I graduated from systems design engineering at Waterloo. I did a bunch of co-ops through that program. So the first 3 I did in design. And then I transitioned after realizing more interested in like the research side of things for my last 3. I did some like startups and stuff like that. Worked at a company called PlanGrid, who later got acquired by Autodesk. And here I am working at Autodesk on some construction software tools.
Round of applause for Kevin. Thank you for coming. And next up, we have Cayley.
Hi, I'm Cayley. I'm an assistant professor in interaction design and user experience research at the Stratford School, which is part of the University of Waterloo. I have about 7 years experience working in UX research, which I started as a master's student on a co-op. And ever since then, I've been kind of bouncing around between business to business, business to consumer, enterprise, companies, startups, everything in between. So a mixed bag of experience there. And now I'm just I'm moving into the teaching side and sharing what I've learned and hoping to spark an interest among the students in Stratford.
Cool. Thank you, Cayley. Round of applause. And last but not least, we have Daniel.
Hello, my name is Daniel. I'm an associate UXR at LinkedIn. I'm originally from Southern California, and I moved up here for college. I got into user experience after hearing a lecture from a psych professor, my intro to psych professor. And ever since then, I was just interested in it and got into it. At LinkedIn, most of the work I do is on LinkedIn Learning. Yeah, just how to make that product as usable as possible. And yeah, I enjoy making music in my free time. And so that's me.
Thank you. Drop your SoundCloud or Spotify in the chat later if you want. But yeah, that is all to our panelists. I will stop sharing my screen now and let's pass it on to Serena and get the questions started.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming to this event, everyone. We're really excited. So the first question we want to ask for the panelists is, how did you come to discover that UX research was the right path for you? Does anyone want to take the question? I guess we can go with Kyle first.
Sure. How did I discover that UX research was the right path for me? This is kind of a really long story. So let's go back to when I was 11 years old, and I wrote an essay on the ethics of homebrew software on consumer electronics. And at that point, I realized I'm a computer person. I like computers. So from there, I grew up, became a teenager, taught myself HTML, CSS, JavaScript, was messing around with coding, went off to university and decided to study psychology because I wanted to become a therapist. Don't ask me how I jumped from being a computer nerd into really being interested in human behavior and talking to people. Human beings are complex. I have many sides to me. While I was in my undergrad studying psychology, I actually started to lose my vision. I have a degenerative eye condition, so I started to slowly lose my vision around 18, 19 years old. And I was using a lot of assistive technology, so screen readers and Zoom tools. And that got me really interested in how do you build technology for people that can't see? How do you build stuff for people who can't hear? There are all these other approaches to using devices. And it got me really curious. I was taking comp sci classes as electives, and I had a TA that I used to talk to a lot. And we were bouncing ideas back and forth. And he said, I think you'd be really interested in UX design, probably because he didn't know what UX research was. And so I started looking more into UX design and realizing there's a research component to it, and really understanding that I had a lot of interest in the research component because of my background in psychology and learning about different research methods there. So from there, I just started to absorb as much information as I could, and it started to become apparent to me that I had a natural affinity towards UX research and asking these questions in the context of how people use different devices. And I had my own background in terms of accessibility needs. So I felt very passionate about it, and that's kind of what got me started down this path. I hope that answered the question well.
Yeah, that's amazing and really inspiring to hear. Would Cayley like to go next?
Sure. I think so. In undergrad, I went into an interdisciplinary program called knowledge integration because after high school, I wasn't really ready to give up any of my interests. So then they had this new program and it was like, yay, no one's going to force me to be specialized. And in that program, I got to take a lot of different courses, and I bounced around from being interested in psychology and being interested in language and interested in computer science and also art history and all these different things. And I was like, there is no job for me until, I'm not sure how it happened, but I learned that user experience as a field existed. And then I just started to explore it more and saw some interesting parallels between kind of design principles, and primarily it was my interest in language and cognition at the time, that you could design things to be persuasive, and you could, a skeuomorph like is similar to a metaphor. And so how do you transpose these ideas about how people think into how we design things to, elicit certain behavior? But I'm not much of a designer myself. So then after getting more interested in it, I found out UX research was a thing, and I could just spend all my time figuring out kind of how people think and why they do what they do. So that was a huge moment for me, and it really opened the door to kind of learn about this field and kind of all the different things you can do. And I didn't have to give up any of my interests because it kind of, all of them are meeting in the middle in UX research, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, that's so great to hear. I love hearing everyone's story because it feels like everyone has a unique journey into UXR. So now I wanted to ask kind of, what is your day-to-day as a UX researcher typically look like? Kind of 30-second quick fire. Cayley, since you last spoke, do you want to speak first?
Sure. Since you said 30 seconds quick fire, I would say meetings, a lot of meetings, but don't let that depress you. It's more so that I was kind of surprised that like, what, you don't get to like do research every single day? No, you have so much context gathering to do. So you meet with developers, you meet with designers, you meet with product management and anyone else who might, have a stake in the game. So there's a lot of that has to happen for you to build your knowledge so that you can kind of plan your research and also provide the best advice that you can.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess, Kyle, would you also like to go next?
To echo Kaylee's sentiments, yeah, a lot of meetings, a lot of context gathering, a lot of being a fly on the wall and just soaking things up and really paying attention to the conversations that are being had, the assumptions that are being made, and trying to understand your stakeholders' goals and motivations. That takes a lot of your time. And as well as on top of it, all the great research tasks we have, like doing interviews, usability tests, and synthesis. But yeah, lots of meetings, lots of talking to people, and lots of tracking down information.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for sharing. And Daniel, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so just to echo the pattern, it's just meetings. There's a lot of meetings. So yeah, Cayley and Kyle definitely touched upon that. So I'll talk about, I guess, a little bit more or a different side that takes up a lot of your time would be data analysis and synthesis and building the story on how you're going to present that data analysis and synthesis to your stakeholders. And so building presentations, data analysis, and then maybe slacking back and forth with stakeholders on updates and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. It seems like there definitely is a trend of meetings every day. So next we're going to go into talking about what is UXR. And for this section, Anthea, would you like to start off?
Yeah, sure thing. So we'll be going into more detail about what is UX research, and starting off with the first question about what do you enjoy about UX research and what do you dislike about it, if there's anything that you do dislike about it. So Kyle, would you like to start us off?
Sure. My answer is probably more specific than anybody wanted to hear, but I really like semi-structured user interviews. That's my favorite part about UX research. I think that having a good conversation with someone that's directed and there's a goal to it, and you have specific insights you're trying to gather up is so fun. Sometimes I catch myself doing it in my personal life, and it's a really, really bad habit to have, like doing research where you're supposed to just be having coffee with a friend. But yeah, I really like semi-structured user interviews. And my least favorite, what do I dislike about being a UX researcher? Nothing, because I'm so grateful to have my job every single day. But if I had to pick one thing, it would probably be how redundant I feel at times, repeating things over and over again to stakeholders just so they really internalize it. Because you can say it once, that doesn't mean they're going to listen, but really just repeating myself is probably my least favorite part about it.
Thank you very much for sharing with us. That's pretty interesting how you found yourself doing that in like your day-to-day conversations. I haven't heard of that before, but that's an interesting point. Cayley,
You'd be surprised.
Thank you. Cayley, would you like to tell us your thoughts about what you enjoy about UXR or what you dislike about it?
Yeah, I think I actually really agree with Kyle. Like, I wasn't gonna be so specific about semi-structured interviews, but is that like face-to-face with people that kind of, I don't know, it puts more gas in the tank. Like it just, I find like re-motivates you because you make these personal connections with people who are actively like using the product or want to use the product on a daily basis. So then you realize like, these are the people that I'm doing this for and who I'm trying to help by doing this. And then that kind of motivates you to go back and keep having those conversations about like what you think is the best thing that we need to do to kind of push things forward. The things that wait, are we doing like and dislike right now?
Okay.
Yeah. There's a certain slowness that can happen depending on the organization. Some of them have a very well baked in strategy for doing UX research. So the barrier to accessing those people to do the interviews with is quite low, whereas other organizations, there's just a lot of red tape, or they're like, you're a what? Like they don't even know that your job exists in the company. And then you have to explain to them and tell them like why it's actually valuable for you to talk to those people. So it really depends on the company, how you navigate that. And sometimes there's a surprising amount of just explaining to people kind of what the benefits of doing this work are and why you need to talk to people and kind of what your intentions are. And showing them what that process looks like so that you can kind of build trust and build relationships within your company. And then that goes a long way going forward from there. But it was something that surprised me when I started, that I had to kind of do that.
Yeah, you bring up a really important point there. I find that in design, we do have to explain a lot why it's important because it's not traditionally recognized. So thank you very much for like sharing your thoughts. And Kevin, would you like to add anything about what you enjoy about UXR and what you perhaps dislike about it?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think like it actually changed a little bit through the conversion from like in-person work to more online for me, or more remote work. Like I found that I enjoy like actual user sessions a lot less when they're remote. I just find it slightly harder to, and I'm like, I'll get used to it now, but like I still kind of like have really fond memories of just like more in-person research sessions. So that's actually gone down for me a little bit in terms of my enjoyment. I find nowadays like the parts that energize me a lot more are like finding ways to communicate research findings. So I think there's like a lot of room for like creativity as well in things like putting together like conceptual models or ways of like documenting workflows or how people communicate. That's like really key part of the process to like make it easier for like your stakeholders to understand what you learned from the research. So I really enjoy that part. Other things I dislike, I think, are like the recruiting aspect sometimes too, like how much back and forth it can be sometimes, like emailing, trying to get the right participant. But it's definitely worth it, like when you kind of like when a good recruit comes together. But yeah, those are a few things.
Yeah, I think from the general responses that we've gotten so far, recruitment can be a pain point in UXR, but it is a very, very necessary part. So thank you all for responding to that question. Now that we've gotten to know about what you enjoy about UXR and what you possibly dislike about it, we want to know what you think is the most important quality in this type of work that you do. What do you think is the most important quality for a user experience researcher to have? So Gloria, would you like to start us off in that question?
Yes, sure. I think obviously the most common quality for a lot of good researchers is obviously curiosity, questioning constantly and asking lots of questions. For instance, I have a coworker right now who he actually doesn't learn about the product from reading documents. He learns about it through interviewing and having conversations and asking questions to the team members. So I think asking someone who asks a lot of questions. And I think another major thing, the empathy is also like the ability to empathize with the user is important. But I think another important quality is like being interested in the truth, because that's something that actually your other stakeholders in the business are not necessarily need to prioritize in their role. So if you're a salesperson, your goal is to make that sales. If you're a product manager, you're more focused on the business aspects of the product. But as user researchers, we're really the only connection to actual customers, actual users. So it's actually our job to kind of really be as truthful as possible as to like, showing like whether, delivering the good news or the bad news. And that's actually one of the hard parts, I think, about user research too, is that it's not always aligned with the intentions or the objectives that the rest of the team may have. But I think it's very important that you're interested in the truth, because a lot of times other stakeholders may not be prioritizing that. So
thank you very much for like sharing your experience, with your day-to-day about us, like what you find to be the most important quality there. It's definitely not easy to like prioritize these different parts of to prioritize these different objectives, especially when other people may have different priorities. But Kevin, would you like to continue with your thoughts on what the most important quality is?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Gloria said was really like top. I think to add on to that, um, like relationship building and communication, super key. So I think for sure when it comes to like, for example, like what Gloria mentioned, like delivering the bad news, like having like a really good working relationship with your stakeholders. Uh, sorry about the sirens, but having a really good relationship with your stakeholders will help kind of deliver that, like making sure that you can build trust um, through the work that you do. And so like, um, for example, like I had a project where it was kind of like more so bad news, whereas like the direction our product is going is really not really in favor. It's not going to really benefit users. It's kind of like a waste of time. Um, but luckily, like the designer I was partnering with, like really good working relationship during that project, and so I was able to like be very candid with her, and she kind of took it, and then we presented together actually to a wider audience. And so when we were presenting together, it also helped kind of like I think increase like the credibility or like what we were trying to really communicate, even though it was like not necessarily what people want to hear. So I think communication and relationship building are super key.
Thank you very much for that. It's interesting how I think someone brought up a point earlier about relationship with the users when you're researching. And it's interesting to see how the relationship that you have with the other people you work with is also important in how you deliver that information as well. So Daniel, do you have any thoughts that you might like to add onto this question?
Yeah, I guess I'll just add a little because I feel like Gloria and Kevin, they definitely touched upon it. Definitely, yeah, communication, curiosity for sure. And so communication and that you're, like we said earlier, like you're in a lot of meetings. And so in a lot of those meetings, you have to kind of probe on your stakeholders on, hey, like, what's the goal of this research? What are the outcomes? And, what are the decisions that might be coming out from this research? And so communication is just really key because you're just talking and communicating with a lot of people. And then, yeah, curiosity, because you're asking a lot of questions to get at that truth. And then I'd also say being a good storyteller is, I would say, another good quality on, okay, now that you've done the entire research, you could present, findings to a bunch of stakeholders, and then at the end they're like, okay, so what? But if you're, a good storyteller and you know how to kind of package these insights that you have found and present them to the team, it could be very impactful to not only the stakeholders, but just maybe other cross-functional partners that you have. And I think that's just kind of like a good quality for a researcher to have. It's just being that good storyteller. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing your points. They're really valuable and really appreciate. Also, just me interjecting, really appreciate your time answering all our questions here. We know that all of these, well, the responses that you've given us so far is based on your experience in the industry. And we'd like to know, thinking back to when you first started out in UX or when you first heard about it, what are some things that you wish you knew? Cayley, would you like to start as well?
Things that I wish I knew.
Yeah.
I didn't know what a product manager was when I started, or like a project manager. Like I had at least heard of that one, but I had no idea how all of these different roles work together. And going back to what Gloria said earlier, like sometimes like UX doesn't always come out on top in decisions. And I just went in being like, well, the best decision for UX has to be the best decision for the product overall. It doesn't matter how long it takes to develop it or whatever. But obviously, like there are a number of different people at the table who are involved in making decisions, including like business decisions and also ones around like the resources that they have to commit to doing something. So that like I had to learn the hard way. And I think kind of having a better idea of the business side overall and how like UX works within organizations and in actual teams would just really help someone to hit the ground running when they get there, because then you won't have to spend so much time kind of learning how all of this plays out. Like my experience before that was mostly just kind of on my own and learning, like I was taking like a human computer interaction course and learning all the methods so I could do the research, but I didn't really have the bigger picture of how that fits in with everything else.
Yeah, that's a very important point. It's often like an intersection of business, tech, and also like understanding people from a user perspective. So would anyone like to continue telling us about what the things that they wish they knew when they started out? Daniel, what about you?
Yeah, I was with that. I would definitely say, echo that point of knowing what a product manager was, and a product product marketing manager, PMM as well. So yeah, definitely just trying to understand a little bit more about my stakeholders and like what is the perspective that they're trying to bring to the research is something that I wish I would have done a little bit more when while starting out, even though I'm still kind of starting out. And then I'd also say leveraging your resources is something that I'm like learning right now, kind of like especially if you're working at maybe a large organization or just an organization where you have some other UXRs that you're working with. Instead of trying to like build a discussion guide by yourself or create all these artifacts that you need when you're trying to do a certain UX method, to just kind of like ask them like, hey, do you have any templates that I could use? And it just erases time. It just makes it more efficient because it's just like they've already made these templates and stuff like that. And then lastly, I'll just say, I wish I would have paid attention a little bit more in statistics. And this might be just a little bit more personal for me, but I know on the team that I'm working on at LinkedIn, we're starting to lean a little bit more towards like trying to measure the user experience in kind of like a mathematical way or quantify the user experience. And so I'm having to kind of like go back and like refamiliarize myself with some of these statistical tests and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I wish I would have just paid a little bit more attention in stats, just basic stats, just like t-tests, ANOVAs, maybe correlations right there. Because I also think that just knowing that basic knowledge from what I've seen is it just makes you stand out as a UXR. Because I think the field is majorly focused on like qualitative research. And so if you know a little bit of that quant side, I think that'll help you stand out, especially when you're trying to like interview for jobs and stuff like that. So those are some things I wish I would have paid attention to more.
Thank you very much for that. Certainly going to pay attention more in my stats class this semester. But having heard about your experience and how you came to it, what you enjoy about UX and what you wish you knew, we are going to move on to the next section of questions about breaking into the UXR industry. And Lauren will be taking us through those questions.
Yeah, so the first question is just how like would I get started in UX research? Where should I begin? So Kyle, do you want to answer this one first?
Sure. Can I ask a question first?
Yeah.
What?
Sure.
Am I answering this question for someone who already has their bearings in terms of how to do research? Or is this like
just
ground
like
zero?
Baseline, like I kind of know what it is, but not really, just like baseline. How would you enter it if you have not a very good idea of what it is in the first place?
Okay. I would say continue to learn as much as you can. Soak up all the knowledge you can in regards to human-centered design, and user experience, broadly speaking. Pick up maybe like 4 research methods and get really good at those. Don't try to collect all the methods. This isn't Pokemon. You want like a few that you're really good at and you can branch out later on. To what Daniel was saying, get a little comfortable with like Excel and doing a little bit of like data analysis there. But really, I think the most important thing is to force yourself into kind of an extrovert mode. Reach out to people on LinkedIn, have coffee chats with people who work in the industry, have coffee chats with people who have similar backgrounds to you. Really try to understand what your value proposition is as a UX researcher. I think that everyone's background can contribute to their research practice tremendously. I've seen people use customer success roles, engineering backgrounds, all kinds of backgrounds to their benefit as UX researchers. So just figure out what the blueprint is for you to succeed in your lane. So find someone else with similar backgrounds and just understand what was their progression like. And I think having connections like that are invaluable to just carving out your path as a researcher. But yeah, in short, learn as much as you can about research and UX broadly speaking. Try to develop that network. Try to look for mentors who have similar backgrounds to you and figure out how your background will lead to your eventual success, because you will succeed. If you're even remotely anxious about that, you will succeed. Everyone in this room. But yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much. Like, it's great to see, like, nice thing about this panel, we have people from like a bunch of different diverse backgrounds. So it's really interesting with UXR. You got people from really any background, and they all have particular skills that they can really use to benefit. So thanks for that great response. Cayley, do you have anything to input on this?
Where to begin? So something that is really valuable, like I spent a few years also interviewing like co-ops for UX research roles, and the ones who succeeded were most often the ones who were able to kind of articulate their thinking and how they approach a problem or how they would approach a problem. And so I think a good way to practice that is start doing case studies on your own. Just come up with a question, or you might notice something that you're interested in that you might want to investigate, or maybe you want to walk through what it would be like to redesign something. But you could also just talk about your school projects. Like, you often have like so many different collaborative projects that involve both research and design, and talking through what you did and why you did it that way and kind of how you justified those decisions is, I think, a really good way to kind of get some experience, almost thinking on the meta level of how you kind of approach things and where you could maybe like learn some new skills or try out new things in a environment that's kind of lower risk. And it's really helpful to kind of have those examples to walk through if someone does ask you, like, tell me about a time when you, I don't know, use some kind of research method, and then you kind of start to have a little collection of things that you can speak about to kind of illustrate to people what you're capable of, and also showing kind of that initiative that you have kind of started to build these skills, and that you're interested in learning more. I think that's really important. Like, we're not looking for people who are like the best ever at all of the methods. It's people who have just that instinct towards wanting to solve something and showing that they are willing to go out and learn what they need to do to be able to answer a question. It's that ability to, I think, find out and recognize that you don't know something, go and find it out, as opposed to like already having the answer.
That's great. Thanks so much. Yeah, it's interesting to see like how you can use your current experiences, even if you may not think that they're particularly like UXR focused, to kind of reflect on them and be able to find key parts that actually are quite helpful for various methods, things like that. And Daniel, do you want to touch on this at all?
Yeah. Yeah, so just echoing earlier points, just definitely try to learn as much as you can. And shameless plug, definitely reach out on LinkedIn to folks. Also because, like, a lot of UXRs, I think we kind of understand how it was like to try to break into the field. And so most UXR people are just willing to help. And so just definitely just feel free to just kind of ping people or reach out and learn as much as you can. And then, yeah, get your feet wet, learn about like a few UXR methods and like just apply them. Like it's okay to do it by yourself. Or maybe, if you know any friends or designers or whoever, just kind of like get a group together and just be like, hey, would you guys be down with like doing this study real quick, with me? But yeah, just don't, I guess, downgrade being able to do like research on your own and putting that on your resume, because I think like what Cayley was saying, for some jobs, they're just trying to see if you can articulate your thought process really well and if you have that grit. And if you go out on your own and you're doing the research by yourself, you're going to eventually be able to articulate and learn a little bit more about the research process from beginning to end. And yeah, I think that'll just make you stand out. And yeah, so that's what I would say is just start to try to do those research methods on your own by yourself. Just collect that knowledge and apply it. Yeah.
Yeah, just like take the initiative to do something and then kind of learn from it. I can see there'd be lots of growth involved with that if you go down that path. So thanks, Daniel. And reaching out is always really great as well. And then for the next question, do you see user experience research connecting to other disciplines other than like the traditional design, psychology, etc. kind of thing? Gloria, can you answer this?
Yeah, I guess speaking from my own experience, I actually have a background in art history, and I was actually planning on studying art history and architecture. So I kind of took a detour. So I guess I'm proof that you can kind of stumble into user research, which is what happened to me. In my case, but I know a lot of the more influential people in our especially in the qualitative user research domain, come from backgrounds like anthropology, sociology, like the social sciences, I think are a valid place. There are a lot of methods that they use that we use as well in industry. There's a great book called Ethnography in the Private Sector by Sam Ladner, and she's a good example of somebody who comes from an anthropology background. So yeah, those are some of the two kind of disciplines that come to mind that aren't necessarily psychology. Psychology tends to be more like human-computer interaction. That's more like the standard type of the more common, I think, background, or like the more obvious good fit. But yeah, I think there's like plenty of other disciplines in the social sciences or even humanities, like in my case. Yeah, so I think that there are other ways to get in as well. I've also known industrial designers that actually have moved into user research as well. So I think how you get in is kind of defines the kind of researcher you will be to a degree. So.
Yeah, it's super interesting. It's like reflecting back on the fact that you have like certain skills coming from the background you're coming from that can help benefit, but you can kind of come from a variety of different backgrounds with those particular skills. So thanks for that. It's great to see all different people you've encountered throughout your time as a user researcher. And Kevin, can you also touch on this? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing actually more recently I've been thinking about is like English class. Like as a researcher, I think back because like even the times when you would like read a piece of work and like analyze the themes, then you like write an essay about it. Like I was just thinking like the other day, it kind of reminded me of the whole process of like synthesis. Like you're engaging, you're kind of absorbing all the information, the data, qualitative data that you have from your users, and you're trying to distill like like the truths or the patterns or the themes, and then find a way to communicate that in a useful way to your stakeholders and tie it to like some purpose, usually tied to the business or design decisions people have to make. So that was one. I was like thinking back to like just classes I took throughout university. I'm like, oh, this feels actually kind of similar. And then I don't know, I think the other thing I kind of leverage a lot that like just from my background, like I did a lot of graphic design in high school. And so I mentioned a little bit earlier, yeah, like creating like conceptual models or the communicating. And for me, at least that comes up a lot in like, I think it was it Daniel who talked a lot about like making presentations, like that comes up super like a ton, like just being able to communicate visually and communicate clearly. So I think like, yeah, like whatever background you come from, there's always kind of a way to wrap it into UX research.
That's great. Thanks so much. So I think we're now moving on to the Q&A portion. So we're going to be looking at the questions you guys asked through Slido, and like feel free to continue asking questions. It's just posted in the chat there.
Yeah, before we move on to the Q&A session, we have a little something prepared for you guys. So both our club, UWX, and the panelists have compiled together 2 lists of resources that are gonna help you get into UXR or learn more about UXR if you're interested. So we'll be sending the links to those compiled list of resources into our chat. And yeah, I hope all of you find them useful. And now, without further ado, let's look at the Slido, get into our Q&A. All right. So Anthea, Serena, do you want to start? These are listed by how many thumbs up, so how many upvotes these questions are. We can just go ahead, pick one, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, definitely. So for the very first question, with 4 spicy upvotes, as a psych undergrad with little experience in tech, I feel far away from UXR. How can I potentially close this gap, both academically or otherwise?
Anybody wants to take it over? Feel free.
Yes, Cayley.
I would say like take the opportunity when you have course projects or like end of term papers to pick topics that relate to tech and relate to UX. So can you study, a certain phenomenon or behavior or whatever the concept is that you're learning about in kind of a UX context and start framing work that way? And that might give you an opportunity or almost like an excuse to kind of get closer to that field and show how you can translate kind of what you know from your psych major into more of a UX research context.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think, Daniel, you had unmuted. Did you want it to also go ahead?
Yeah, I was just gonna say like leverage your professors. I'm just speaking from personal experience here. I didn't, I was a psych undergrad. I didn't have really a lot of experience in tech or any experience in tech at all. And so I worked in my professor's lab and just doing research with him from beginning to end, just helping him with his studies, just really helped me. And the research that we did do was related to, I guess, tech in some capacity. Actually, now that I think about it. So I would definitely say like, try to leverage your professors. Maybe try to find a professor who is maybe doing research in tech or like cybersecurity or something like that, to get your feet wet there with experience. And then, Cayley said, when you're doing your research papers, try to do related to tech in some type of way. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Daniel. Super helpful. Nice to see like how you can just try to integrate it into your current learning, so that it's not like you're doing additional work, it's just like together. Just a quick thing for like the person who asked about the favorite resources, we've like attached the list of like what our panelists had already listed, so you can see that in the chat. And then for the one about any portfolio tips, is there anyone who wants to answer this? Gloria, would you like to do it?
Yeah, what do they mean? I don't know if they're anonymous, but I'm just curious what they mean by portfolio tips. Do they mean like presenting your portfolio or what goes in a portfolio?
Would you be able to touch on briefly both parts?
Yeah, so with actually putting together, having a portfolio, you would need case studies. So you build, and typically case studies can be either your school projects, or they could be, or preferably they would be industry projects, especially if you're interviewing with a company after school. So my major portfolio tip would be to try to have at least one industry project that shows impact, because that's, you typically, when you're presenting a portfolio at a job interview, the most important thing they'll be looking for is what kind of impact did you have on the product or the company. They'll be looking for examples of like how you and evidence of that. So whether it's certain metrics that changed, the KPI, or whether you increase revenue or subscription, they want to see some evidence of impact. So whatever evidence you have of that, doesn't have to always be about business too, it could be other types of impact as well. But I think the biggest takeaway for having a good portfolio is you need to be able to show how you have benefited the organization, the company, the place you are working with.
Great, thank you. And does anyone else want to answer? Maybe Cayley, you had said previously that you had helped with people applying, not helped, you had interviewed people. So I feel like you may have some experience knowing what's good and what's bad.
Yeah, I think a well-done portfolio is one that considers like what the user experience of reading that portfolio is like, and where you kind of put into practice all the things that you know, as well as, telling the story of what you did, how you did it, what it means, like what are the most important things that you want to communicate, and make sure that those things come through. You don't make people do work reading your portfolio to kind of pull out what the important parts are. Just like serve it to them on a silver platter. And to do that, I think something that I learned too late was like to keep screenshots of projects as they're going on if you are in a position where you maybe have some experience working on projects already, because you know how much they changed from start to finish, but the person who is looking at your portfolio won't know that. And it's really hard to go back like a year later and find all those screenshots. So just try your best to stay on top of it at the time, and then put them in a folder, put them somewhere so that they're organized. Even if you don't have time to update your portfolio right now, at least you have them. And then you can work on putting that story together.
Great, thank you. It makes complete sense that you want to have something that's user-friendly when you're applying for a job that proves how user-friendly you are. So thank you for that. Anthea, would you like to ask like the next question?
Yes, of course. So thank you all for answering that. The next, top most voted question we have is by Anonymous. So as a psych undergrad with little experience in tech, I feel quote unquote far away from UX research. How can I potentially close this gap, whether academically or otherwise? Would anyone like to touch on this question first? Oh wait, that question was answered already. I'm so sorry, everyone. The next question is about opinions on pursuing grad school versus internships. Not that you can't do both. Sorry, is on what your opinions are on pursuing grad school versus internships. If anyone would like to start us off. I'll take some time to think, that's fine as well.
I would actually, I might, if you don't have to go to grad school, don't, is my suggestion, unless there's a specific topic that you really want to dive deep into. If you're sure about that and confident about like that's going to bring you value to your life or to whatever your agenda is, that's the only reason why I would recommend grad school. But otherwise, if you can pursue the internship, I think that's better. However, that said, it does definitely help to have a master's degree, especially if you're applying to jobs at more competitive, like the FANG type companies. It does help to have a graduate degree. Yeah, it's a tough question because they really have to analyze your situation, your personal financial situation. Is grad school, that's a risk that you're taking out as well, like financially, the loan, unless you're being fully funded or something like that. So you have to weigh all of that when you make a decision like that. In my personal, like from the people that I know of, it skews more towards a luxury item, unless of course you have a very specific topic that you want to dive deep into, and that which is more of an academic exercise, and you're not so concerned about the financial aspect of it.
Thank you very much, Gloria, for responding to that question. Do any of our other panelists want to share their thoughts on grad school versus internships after their undergrad?
I guess I would say I actually went to grad school so that I could do internships because I didn't have co-op in my undergrad, but my master's program, I started in the English department and it had an 8-month co-op, and that was how I got my first UXR role, which was nice because it was kind of like a try it before you buy it scenario. Like, do I want to spend my whole life doing this? But yeah, I would definitely agree with Gloria that like it depends so much on kind of your own personal situation. We're really lucky, like at least at Waterloo, that the grad programs are fully funded, but that also, fully funded only goes so far. It's not really a realistic amount of money, so you're going to have to do work on the side. I shouldn't say that, I'm a prof, but it's a bit cushier. And we're seeing more and more programs now that are kind of catering towards building the skills that you would need in UX research, but it is something that, yeah, you're going to see other people kind of graduating and start working, and they'll be, 2 years ahead of you, but weighing that against having a master's degree and potentially having a bit of a competitive edge, it really depends on the person and kind of what you want to do.
Thank you very much for that. I think the response to this is showing that it's not a one size fits all answer. It's about you and what would bring you value in your experience and the path that you're going to take, and also take into consideration the cost of that as well. Gabby, if Gabby's here, and if Gabby can, would like to ask some questions as well. If everyone hasn't met Gabby yet, she's also a UX researcher at UW Blueprint. And yeah, there's Gabby. She just waved. She'll be continuing with the questions for us.
Hi, everyone. Pardon me, I have a little bit of a cough, so I will mute myself if I, go into a coughing fit. But hi, everyone. Hope you guys are enjoying the panel so far. Moving right ahead with the questions. So for our panelists here, what are your, I guess we have some more resources already in the doc. that will be sent, that I think we already sent out in the Notion. So I'll move on to then a more programming oriented question, which is coding significant in UXR? If so, how significant? I have no experience whatsoever and I'm pretty intimidated by it. So maybe if a panelist want to speak to the more technical nature of UXR, I think this would give some good context on how the two kind of mesh together.
I have something to say about this actually. I did a lot of coding in my last job, but it was mostly in R or statistical programming, just because the nature of the company, I had to do a lot of sales modeling at times. I was the quantitative researcher because I was the only researcher since it was a startup. But do you need to know how to code to be a good UX researcher? No, you do not. I think that it is a nice to have depending on the kind of companies you want to work at. If you want to work at a startup, more skills the better, just because it makes you more valuable. You're a plug and play worker in a lot of different positions, the more skills you have. But to actually be a good UX researcher, I don't think it maybe adds a little bit of value because it lets you empathize a bit more with your more technical stakeholders, but I don't think it's a necessity.
Yeah, I would agree with Kyle. I also had a similar situation where like in an interview, like I showed like some quantitative statistical analyses that I did, and I think that like helped me stand out from the pack. But like when it actually comes to like my current job, like I don't think you really don't need it, especially I think most companies are more like qual focused. It's like extra. I would say like in terms of like how much you need, I feel like you can learn a lot of like what you need to just from like communicating with your engineering stakeholders, like just trying to be curious and be open-minded about like when they're talking about trade-offs, like, you know, just try to like understand where they're coming from, try to dig a little bit deeper into like why they're pushing for certain things that they're pushing for, just to, you know, just kind of use your research skills on them a little bit. And then, yeah, to build the empathy, and you'll probably learn everything you need to that way. I would say.
Yeah, sounds like from both answers is that coding helps and can make you stand out, but absolutely is not, you know, necessary to join UXR. Great. Let's move on then to a now more philosophical question. What are some common ethical dilemmas you might encounter in UXR? This might take a little bit of time to think about.
I mean, I'll own up to it and say that I've never sent out like a informed consent form during any of my research studies. And that's something I think about a lot. I think by nature, UX research, a lot of times we don't stress informed consent as much as they would in academic setting. And there's definitely ethical ramifications to that. But I personally don't have anything that makes me lose sleep at night. Maybe someone else does.
I think this might be a tougher question to answer. I guess to maybe kind of give everyone kind of some food for thought. Ethics is very subjective, and there isn't really a handbook out there that says like, oh, you know, this kind of practice, design practice is ethical, this isn't. And something I would really highly recommend looking into, if you haven't heard of it already, I think it's the concept of like dark patterns in design. So as a designer, you'll probably have come across, you know, for example, like hidden opt-in checkboxes, where, you know, you're automatically selected to join a newsletter or join 3 newsletters that you didn't consent to, right? And a lot of these patterns are used by companies to drive certain metrics or get additional users into a product when the users haven't really consented to it. And I think as user researchers, we have the responsibility to also understand the impact of the designs that we push for and to kind of look past the business value and actually actually understand, like, hey, like, are we putting our users' best interests at heart when we design certain things into the product? If does anyone have anything to add? If not, I can move on to the next question.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. I actually have a colleague at Okta who teaches a class specifically in user research ethics. So I think this is something that, like you said, there isn't really a good handbook for this, especially in the private sector. But it's definitely something that comes up and in different shapes and forms. I think like things like GDPR and CCPA, like data gathering, privacy, security, like those are things that are becoming much more standardized within just the tech industry in general, and also by extension how we're expected to be able to comply with our participants' requests if they want to have all of their information deleted, things like that, having good governance structures for data internally, policies, it's all kind of related, I think. Yeah, I think that's kind of like a area where it's still, I think that people are still kind of developing it, articulating it, something that, GDPR only was, became a thing, like, what was it, like 2 years ago, I think, like 2.5, something like that. So it's all really different and quickly changing how a lot of this, the governance and the requirements, the legal requirements at least, and then putting aside like legal requirements and the ramifications from that we may face from the law, but there's also kind of the more the gray areas where we're collecting data about our participants. How do we handle that data? How much do we share? How much are we required to share with our participants? When you think about market research studies, they do the glass, the non-reflective, the one-way glass mirror kind of thing. Well, that happens also in user research as well. So yeah, I mean, it's really interesting topic to consider. And I think that's probably an area that that's worth exploring and probably being developed right now. So if anyone is interested in learning more about that, or kind of developing a practice, or developing their digging deeper in that, I think that would be a really interesting kind of area to explore and to develop.
Yeah, that was a great answer, Gloria. And for any Waterloo students here, I think Wednesday, Waterloo is actually having a open forum, an open forum on integrity, algorithmic integrity in technology. They've got lots of really great speakers there. So if you look up UWAIT, so U : and then WAIT, it's not just open to Waterloo students, it's really open to everyone. But there will be a lot of industry researchers there as well, kind of discussing this topic. So yeah, if ethics concern are of interest to you, including ethical dilemmas within UXR, definitely reach out to this and reach out to this forum. Cool. Does someone else mind asking questions? Actually, I think my voice might be dying here.
Yeah, sure. So I guess moving on, as a student who's looking to become a UX researcher, what research methods do you think are most important to highlight in your portfolio?
I guess I can start with this one. In the course I taught in the fall, we kind of split methods into 4 general buckets that kind of represented different phases of the process. So I think a well-rounded kind of impression might come from showing familiarity with not all the methods, but just 1 or 2 from each of those buckets. So first we had methods for planning, scoping, and problem definition. So things like design thinking and stakeholder analysis, doing literature reviews, focus groups, empathy maps, that kind of thing. Really that more generative kind of thinking. And then phase 2 was for exploration, synthesis, and design implications. And these are just rough buckets, by the way. They're not definitive because UX research is pretty squishy and you can use the methods at all different times. But in that phase, we move a bit into the more specific. So things like contextual inquiry, interviews, surveys. Phase 3 is now we've collected all this information, we need to move into kind of concept generation and prototype iteration. So we might do design sprints. We might go into making out scenarios, thinking about how might we, that kind of thing. And then phase 4 is more of the evaluation, refinement, and production. And so usability testing, now that we have, we've iterated on that prototype a bit, maybe getting people to go through it with a think aloud protocol or doing some A/B testing. And that's where we see more of the statistical methods kind of coming in. So really showing that trajectory from the really broad brainstorming to the information gathering to thinking about how do we solve these problems, and then how do we verify that our proposed solutions are actually the healthiest solutions, are a nice way to, I guess, show skills.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really detailed, and that's a really interesting one. I learned about the IBM activation journey, and it's interesting how different methods can be applied using different design thinking processes. I saw, Daniel, you had unmuted for a second. Did you want to go, or?
Oh, no. I am muted for like
Okay. Okay, then this is awkward. Okay, so moving on to, did anyone else want to answer? Gloria, Kyle, Kevin? Okay, so moving on to the next question. So any advice for incorporating participatory research / design within an industry role? Is it even common / possible to get buy-in from stakeholders for that?
I think with the design stakeholders, it's easier to get buy-in for that because there's a lot that you can do with participatory research and design with design. So they will probably be your most receptive stakeholder for that specifically. But I've also had positive feedback as well from product managers because some forms of participatory research and design, it involves creation of artifacts, which are, can be visual, and sometimes that helps to, really it helps the other stakeholders, people like the product managers, to really understand what's going on from a user standpoint. So yeah, so I think design probably would be the most receptive, but then you've got another line of stakeholders that would benefit from it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing. And would anyone else like to chime in and add in their thoughts? Alrighty then. So moving on to the next question, Lauren, would you like to take it over?
Yes, so we've kind of like missed this one with 5 upvotes, so I'm just gonna do that one first. Regarding psychology as an educational basis for UXR, what particular disciplines within psych would be the most relevant? Cayley, would you like to expand on this?
I think we did this one, but it's like stuck at the top.
Sorry, yeah, never mind. Okay, I'll then ask, how do you make sure that you do not fall into the trap of confirmation bias when doing research? Cayley, can I ask you again? Sorry for that, by the way.
No, no worries. That's a really interesting question, because I think it can be pretty easy to get caught up in kind of what you believe is, the main problem people are facing, and it's important to talk to a variety of different people who use the product or who might use the product, so that you're getting a variety of perspectives, because what's challenging for one person isn't necessarily going to be for another person or another whole group. So definitely, the people that you're recruiting or working with can kind of contribute to what you believe to be the case. What else? I think working with other people also is really helpful. If you can team up, for example, after you've collected interview data and you're going to go through and look for the themes, looking through transcripts that aren't interviews that you did can kind of create some distance between yourself and what the people are saying, so that you're not having more of an emotional response about a memory of how they said something. That can help too. I don't know, interested to see if anybody else has something to add on that.
Does anyone else? Oh, sorry, Gloria, go ahead.
Oh yeah, actually I just shared a cognitive bias chart to the channel. I find this chart really helpful because basically when you're doing research, it's all about like there's so many biases that you need to be aware of and cognizant, informed about. That's actually part of our job as a user researcher, is to do whatever we can to de-bias the research. So I find this chart actually really helpful. And I think that, yeah, it's definitely something that can also, you need to be aware of it, because it potentially biases can also, it may like adversely affect like the quality of the research that you're reporting as well. So yes, I would say that it's very important to not only confirmation bias, but all of these different kinds of biases that you need to be aware of. I also recommend the book, that Daniel Kahneman book, Thinking Fast and Slow. I think that can also be helpful as a reference as well. But yeah, you always have to kind of learn about different kinds of biases that to be aware of. But yeah, this chart, I love it.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Gloria. Looks like a massive, really good chart. Does anyone else want to add on to this, or is it time to finish up? I guess we'll move on to the conclusions then. Fox and Serena.
Yeah, and that would conclude the Q&A session. And basically, our panel will come to an end. But before that, we do have a feedback survey that we'll be sending to all of the participants. And if you do complete the survey, which is a Google form, you'll have a chance to win a $10 gift card. So please fill it out. Let us know how you thought of this event and give us any feedback. you want. And yeah, here you go in the chat again is the resources that both the UWUX Club as well as the panelists has compiled together. And with that being said, thank you for coming. Thank you to all of our panelists. This chat has been very, very insightful, and I'm sure everyone felt the same way as I am. And yeah, thank you so much. We're very grateful to have this chat with you. And yeah, we will see you guys in the next event if you come, and take care, guys. I hope you had a good Monday. Have a good start of the week, and I hope all of your weeks go well. All right.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks for
Take care,
coming,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you for coming, and thank you all the panelists.